Labas na ba? Hello, good evening, good lahat. Welcome to another book survey, and we're nearing the end of Old Testament actually, and right now we are in the book of Nahum. Nahum or excuse me. The book of Nahum, no? Well, it might be familiar to you or might not be familiar to you kasi yung book of Nahum is not so discussed, di ba? And we're just out of the book of Jonah, it's where we have yung Nineveh. And right now, sa book of Nahum, we were unaware na dito pala diniscuss ano yung preceding event nangyari sa Nineveh. Okay. So first, it seems odd that the prophecy that is all about yung Nahum, no, God's unleashing his wrath on his enemies, comes from a prophet whose name means comfort. Yung si Nahum or Nahum, no, it means comfort or consoler. But actually, it's not a coincidence na yung pangalan niya na comfort, the opposite is actually yung theme na meron yung book of Nahum, and that God unleashing his wrath, because the prophecy of Nahum, no, is all about comfort to the people of Judah. Okay. The book of Nahum, woe to the city of blood, full of lies, full of plunder, never without victims. So that is found in chapter 3 of Nahum. So first, we're going to look at the overview and background of the book of Nahum. A little bit logged or loading siya. Okay, there we go. So the book of Nahum, no, to give you an overview, in the book 12, there were 12 minor prophets, and Nahum is in the 7th. Is an unrelenting denunciation of pronouncement of God's judgment against Assyria for her own unrelenting as must of the nations. Such, Nahum, in contrast to the book, depicts at an earth point in time was concerned for even his bitterest enemies. So, itong book of Nahum, no, God's judgment means itong Assyria. Yung Assyria during this time is very powerful. They were considered as the lion. Okay, so again, itong book of Nahum, no, it stands in contrast with the book of Jonah, kasi sa book of Jonah, pinakita doon ang grace ng Panginoon, in which when Jonah had preached to Nineveh, they repented, and so binigyan sila ng pagkakataon ng Panginoon. And now, in the book of Nahum, dito na yung judgment ng Panginoon. Next, overview and background. But now Assyria's sin has reached its full measure, and Yahweh's famous patience is necessarily at an end. For three things about this background that are essential for understanding itong book of Nahum. First, si Nahum was prophesying while Assyria is still at the height of her powers, having earlier established her presence in Egypt by conquering itong Thebes. So itong Thebes is located sa Egypt to, no? I think it was the capital of Egypt na conquered nila with King Ashurbanipal, yung king ng Assyria during this time. So they were in the height of their power, yung Assyria. And it was not an immediate, actually hindi immediate yung nangyari na pagkabagsak ng Assyria, ng Nineveh, pero it was a Saturn. Kasi andun sila sa taas pero bigla sila bumagsak. There was a judgment coming from the Lord. And that happens in 612 BC. Later on, we'll discuss yung time frame nila. Second, na para maintindihan natin yung book of background for the book of Nahum, Assyria was well known among the ancients. Indeed, the records of her own kings verify it as the most cruel of conquerors. Her treasuries were legendary and barbaric, including the total destruction of peoples that were conquered. Third, naman, during the whole period in which Nahum could have prophesied, the kings of Judah, itong si Manasseh, I think, and Josiah were vassals of Assyria. All of this means that Nahum's prophesying was politically incorrect in every way except from Yahweh's point of view. So, sa second, no, itong Assyria ay kilala sila that they were violent, they were barbaric, brutal. No, when I say, you could just imagine how they killed the children. Yung when they conquered yung Thebes, they slaughtered everybody there and made people slaves, and di ba? They were exiled in yung mga ibang tao, even sa Israel, no? When they conquered Israel, everyone was terrified of Assyria kasi no, napakalakas ng kapangyarihan na meron ang Syria. They have warriors, strong soldiers, and they were barbaric. Napaka-cruel nila, no? So, the third naman, Nahum, all of this means that Nahum's prophesying was politically incorrect in every way kasi during that time, the time of Manasseh, no? Si King Manasseh, they were vassals. Kumbaga, vassals, they pay tribute to Assyria. Etong Judah, kasi itong audience nito, ang audience nito sa time na nagpo-prophesy si Nahum ay ang Judean people. Okay, so pero yung subject na pinoprophesy niya is yung sa Nineveh, na yung Assyria. So sinasabi ni Nahum, no, that Judah were vassals. They pay tribute to the king, to the country of Assyria. Nagbibigal sila. Kasi in 701 BC, they were nearly captive by Assyria. Yung Jerusalem, pero hindi sila na captive. And then, ngayon, ang nangyayari, they pay tribute to Assyria, to the king of Assyria. So that actually was the overview and background na meron tayo for the book of Nahum, no? It was, hello? Narinig ba? So,
Clear, bro. Go
that
lang.
is overview and background. Sorry, akala ko kasi hindi narinig. So, this time, let's proceed to authorship and date. So, the author of the book of Nahum identifies himself as Nahum. In Hebrew, ibig sabihin is consoler or comforter. Nahum the Elkoshite. Yung Elkoshite, accordingly, no, there were assumptions of scholars and biblical uh, scholars na it's something, may apat silang assumptions. And one of these is saying na this Elkosh or Elkoshite, being this Elkosh is nakikita ito yung land na Capernaum in Galilee, in which tinatawag siya the village of Nahom. So they believe na doon naninirahan itong si two events. First, yung sa fall of the Egyptian city of Thebes, which ng and second to the Assyrian armies of Ashurbanipal and the destruction of Nineveh in 612 BC. So yung nangyari na tong prophecy ni Nahom nagkatotoo na in 612 BC no natalo na-conquered ng Babylon and Medes no itong Assyria. So for the historical setting, at the beginning of Nahum's prophetic ministry, no, Assyria was at the peak of its power. Ashurbanipal, yung king ng Assyria, Assyria's greatest king, conquered Egypt in 663 BC. Nahum must have been written after 663 BC because it mentions yung fall of Thebes which took place at that time. So if taken seriously, if taken as a prophecy, itong book of Nahum, the book's message must have been presented to the people before 612 BC kasi nangyari yung fall of Assyria nga sa 612 BC, 612 before Christ. The year Nineveh fell to the invading no, no, na yung actually itong Medes, yung Medes in 3 months na defeat nila itong Assyria, and then they believe, no, scholars believe that it was Medes actually defeated itong Assyria, but then they found no interest dito sa Medes, and so binigay na lang sa Babylonia, and sa Babylonian records, no, nilagay nila na sila talaga yung nakatalo sa sa Assyria, and that is to took pride and to uphold their dignity. Yun yung ginawa ng Babylonian. Kaya mostly we could see that it was Babylon who defeated, no, to the books na mababasa natin. It was Babylon who defeated etong Assyria. So that is for the historical setting ng book of Nahum. At parang wait. Yes, for paramount purpose, no, of the book of Nahum, Nineveh's destruction was not human empire to another. It was one of the very purpose of book of Nahum, affirm the sovereignty of the Lord. That not Nineveh or Assyria yung naging makapangyarihan by that time. It is direct judgment of the Lord. Second, but in a larger sense, to affirm that God punishes all sin. Though he is slow to get angry, he will not let the wickedness go unpunished. So, and the third one is to assure Israel that God cares for his own. um, that is the purpose for the prophecy, itong oracle ni Nahum, no, to announce really the doom of the Nineveh after Jonah and around 760 BC have prophesied doon sa Nineveh and they repented nila. So here comes in Nahum prophesying their doom because God have finally come to judge them, have finally come to judgment. And lastly, to assure Israel that God cares for his own, because makikita natin kung mababasa niyo in the book of Nahum that God stand up and fight for his children. That is why nilagay nga doon sa pangalan, it was not a coincidence nga kanina that the name of Nahum, comfort, no, means comfort, kasi God brings comfort unto them through the prophecy na nabagsak ang Assyria. Bakit? Kasi nga, etong Assyria, they were so cruel. Kung mababasa nyo sa last chapter 3, sa last verse, who have not experienced your cruelty. Ganun nakalagay. So everyone was, they experienced suffering because of Assyria, no? That terrifies them. So because of the fall of Assyria, it shows only that God have fight for his children. The God took care for his own children. Itong Judah. Okay. So next, let's talk about the structure naman. Yes, the structure for the book of Nahum. So meron tayong three verses no it's in the beginning verses na meron doon the general principles. The general principles, God's vengeance in judgment. Dito sa preceding verses sa chapter 1, pinaliwanag kung ano ba yung mga uh, divine judgment of the Lord, no? God's power in judgment described dito. And then the destruction of Nineveh and deliverance of Judah. And then the destruction second sa structure natin is the destruction of Nineveh is described dito in the call to battle, the destruction of Nineveh, and then last the destruction of Nineveh is deserved. Dito sa chapter 3, no, around chapter 3 to siya, pinaliwanag ano ba yung mga reasons for the destruction of Nineveh. Nineveh's great, the destruction of Nineveh is inevitable. And then yung Nineveh strongholds are weak, including yung leader nila are weak. So before we move forward yung sa unique features and so forth, can we have break time, boys? Around 5 minutes lang. Wait lang, let me just drink some water. Good chance na lang muna for this. Yes. Once again, sorry for the delay. This time, let's talk about the unique features in the book of Nahum. So Nahum actually, no, is our major source of information concerning the destruction of Assyria. After what we have heard, yung nangyari sa Assyria, Jonah, the book of Jonah, dito naman sa Nahum pinaliwanag kung yung event, no, preceding events na nangyari talaga. Question in the book of Jonah, and this time it was given following explanations sa events. Then secondly, no, the unique features that possessed by Nahum and Obadiah actually were the only OT prophets who pronounced doom on a pagan nation without mentioning yung sins of Israel. Yung mga kasalanan ng no, it was just all about the pagan nations, and it's affirming, no, it's giving comfort to to Israel, to Judah, kasalanan din nila. So third unique feature for this book is that Nahum, no, documents the cruelty of Assyria, which has been called the arch villain of the OT. It's more ruthless by far than Israel's any other foes. Ganun po kasama. So etong Assyria, I mean, was used very well by the Lord actually, no, to destroy yung mga nations that uh, hurt yung Israel and Judah, like Babylon, no? Assyria ang ginamit ng Panginoon to strike all of them. But Assyria was getting too far from the role that the Lord had given to them, no? They move forward to violence and killing children, innocents, no? And so to that, kasi they take pride na sila yung villain of the Old Testament. And that is something, no, that has been characterized dito sa sa Nahom as part of the unique features. Now, let's talk about yung special considerations for judgment because wait, wala pa pala next. Yan. Special considerations in reading. Nineveh was now ripe for judgment because of her sins. She was now sinning in the light of knowledge. You know what? Ito yung naging grave sin talaga that we could consider na yung sin that has been committed by Assyria right now is knowledge. Kaya nga sinabi, God is slow to anger. Paano naging slow to anger si God kung He judges nga itong Jonah to preach them, di ba? And this time, narinig nila, di ba? Ang message ni Lord, ang prophecy ni Jonah. And so this time, they were sinning in the light of knowledge. In all of the sins that they've committed, the Lord brings judgment unto them right now. So, second, special considerations in the book of Jonah. As part of the covenant with Abraham, God had sworn that He would curse those nations that curse Israel. Makikita natin yan sa Genesis 12:3, no? And this prophecy illustrates the validity of that declaration. Nakikita natin kung babasahin niyo from chapter 1 and to chapter 2 na God is a divine warrior fighting for his people, fighting for Israel, no? Taking vengeance unto those that hurt his people. And eto na yung ginawa niya towards sa Assyria, sa Nineveh. And lastly, no, the preparation for the destruction of Nineveh and the description of its downfall and desolation are expressed in the most vivid color and are bold and luminous in the highest degrees. So, yung poetic style ni Nahom is very good. Its beauty contrasts with the harshness sa message niya. Kaya nga sabi ni Bishop Loth stated this well when he wrote, none of the minor prophets, however, seem to equal Nahum. His prophecy to forms a regular and perfect poem. The exordium is not merely magnificent, it is truly majestic. The preparation for the destruction of Nineveh and the description of its downfall and desolation are expressed, express in the most vivid colors and are bold and luminous in the highest degree. Ganon ka ganda yung pagkasulat nitong Book of Nahum. No, both in his imagery and his use of compact parallelism, Nahum showed himself a master poet. So this is very good to consider in reading Nahum. Now let's move forward to the specific advice in reading. Okay, key verses. Yeah. So for the key verses, let's start with Nahum 1, chapter 1, verse 3. Sinabi doon, the Lord is slow to anger, but great in power. The Lord will not leave the guilty unpunished. So indeed, the Lord Assyria was guilty of that sins na she have committed. Nahum 1:6, no, who can withstand his indignation? Who can endure his fierce anger? His wrath is poured out like fire. The rocks are shattered before him. Ganon ang galit ng Panginoon. He was fierce in anger. Wrath is poured out like fire. Bakit nga ba ganun na lang yung galit niya with the people of Nineveh? No? When in fact, God is merciful. No? We really know that God is merciful. It is because yun nga, because of the unholiness na ginawa nila, the idolatry that they have done before God is overwhelming. Napakagrabe po yan. And Nahum 1:7, the Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in Him. Indeed, for those people who trust in the Lord, He for chapter 1, verse 14. The Lord has given a command concerning you, Nineveh. You will have no descendants to bear your name. Ganun yung prophecy ni Nahum sa kanila, no? The Lord has given a command, you will have no descendants to bear your name. Kaya nga yung Nineveh, after their downfall, hindi na sila muling na-recover with mga archaeologists. And now it was revealed that ito palang Nineveh was the presently Iraq, according dito. In Nahum 1:15, look there on the mountains, the feet of one who brings good news, who proclaims peace. Nahum 2:13, behold, I am against you, says the Lord of hosts. Ganun yung galit ng Panginoon that no, Assyria was now against with the God of heavens. Nahum 3:19 is fatal. Everyone who hears the news about you claps hands at your fall. For who has not felt? Everyone actually around them, no, that has been nabisita ng Assyria, have felt their endless, their cruelty of violence. No? Kaya, ang sinabi dyan, they will clap your hands. They will clap their hands. No? When Nineveh perished, no one have ever lamented unto them, have ever wept before them because of their uh, evilness, di ba? So, ganun po ang sa Assyria. Next, talk about the specific advices in reading in the book of Nahum. So, this book of Nahum is a carefully crafted, brilliantly executed piece of poetry, no? In which a whole variety of prophetic forms, hymns, salvation, doom, taunt, dirge are carefully interwoven so as to effect what is basically yung Wu oracle or Nineveh, along with the salvation oracle sa Judah. Part of Nahum's mastery is his immediate introduction of Yahweh. So 1, 2 to 6, no? Followed by the interweaving of oracles against Nineveh and to Judah, without mentioning Judah until sa chapter 1, verse 15, and Nineveh until 2 to 8. All of this expressed in wonderful poetic style with a whole variety of parallelisms and evocative imagery and alertness to this various structure na meron ang Book of Nahum, no? And metaphorical matters will enhance ourselves when reading in the Book of Nahum. We have to consider yung mga metaphorical na mga ginamit ni Prophet Nahum dito. No, there are imagery of lions, no, and prey devoured by lions, ganon, for instance. So that is for the advices in reading the book of Nahum. Now for the mega themes, the first mega themes that we have is the message of God's comfort to Judah. Sinabi niya dyan in chapter 1 verse 15, celebrate your festivals, Judah, and fulfill your vows. No more will the wicked invade you. They will be completely destroyed. So in the book of Nahum, no, God appears as a warrior ready to do the battle on behalf of his people. And to the Judeans na nakarinig nito, first read this in the book in 7th century BC, this prophecy was a long-awaited message of hope. They had been living in the shadow of Assyrian oppression for many years. Now God was going to act against their wicked folk, yung Assyria. the message of the judgment of the Assyrians, and specifically the destruction of Nineveh, communicated compassion toward the people of God. God fulfilled the promise of this prophecy, and Nineveh was destroyed by the Medes and the Babylonians in 612 BC. However, itong people nga of Judah themselves continued to try the patience of God with their sinful rebellion. As a result, nangyari, uh, yung Babylon in 586, the great king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, subjugated yung Judah. And that was the first mega themes na makikita natin, manunotice natin when reading in the book of Nahum, that the message of God's comfort towards Judah is being highlight. Bakit nga ba kino-comfort sila? Kasi nga, natatakot na sila. Muntik na silang ma-captive, and now they were vassals of Assyria. So, and we have King Manasseh with them na napaka-shaky because he's thinking na madali lang silang ma-prone into captivity na naman ng Assyria. And by this time, alam nila yung cruelty ng Assyria. So takot sila during this time. And so God is reminding them through this prophecy, no, ni Nahum, to comfort them, to bring them, to console them, na God is there for them. Second mega themes is the message of God's Assyria. Yeah. Message of God's judgment over mighty Assyria. Sinabi niya dyan in verse 3 to 5, chapter 3, verse 5, I am against you, declares the Lord Almighty. I will lift your skirts, your nakedness, and the kingdoms of your shame. Etong Assyria kasi, they hold pride of as the arch-villain ng Old Testament. Yung line of power, hierarchy of power, yung Assyria yung nasa top by this time. And the barbaric military policies and practices of the Assyrians terrorized the ancient Near East for more than 2 centuries. So popular talaga itong Assyria. They were mighty Assyria. But God brings judgment unto them. Sabi ko nga kanina, they were used by the Lord, pero they step overboard by this word, brings judgment unto them. And that is one of the mega themes found in the book of Nahum. Second, a third of the mega themes highlighted in the book of Nahum is the message of God's supremacy over kingdoms. Sabi niyo dyan in chapter 1, verse 5, the mountains quake before him, and the hills melt away. The earth trembles at his presence, the world and all who live in it. So the Lord was reminding itong Assyria and all of the surrounding kingdoms that it's God that is supreme over them. God is reminding them that hello, I am the superior above all of you, no? Kasi they consider, yun nga kanina, itong uh, Assyria, they regarded themselves as lion, who yung mga surrounding nations nila are prey to be devoured. But now, here comes the real lion, no? Bring judgment and reminding that he is the supreme, and that is the Lord, our God, si Yahweh. So that is one of also God's message of God's supremacy over kingdoms. Kasi dati, it's all about war and war and war and power, no? Talagang battle over nations, over kingdoms. Lastly, last mega themes found the book of Nahum is the message of God's justice over atrocities. in chapter 3, verse 1 to 3, yung sa pinakasimula natin sa title presentation, Woe to the city of blood, full of lies, full of plunder, never without victims. These words pa lang, kung mababasa natin, why does si Prophet Nahom exclaim using this word? Napaka-strong, characterizing yung uh, Nineveh as city of blood. So napaka-violent nila ng ng city ng Nineveh as a city, Assyria as a country itself. The crack of whips, the clap, charging cavalry, flashing swords, and glittering spears. Ito na yung mangyayari sa kanila. There were charging cavalry, flashing swords, and glittering spears coming to towards Assyria. So it only shows committed even by his own. Yes, hello? Even by the pagan people, atrocities, mga trespasses committed by them. Because God, justice over atrocities is one of the home that God brings na commit ng mga tao. And it's for atrocities. We are accountable of all the sins in the day of judgment. Now, let's move to the book of Nahum. So there are 4 theologies. Yes, first makikita natin that God is uh, a good God, He's an avenging God, powerful and active God, and a God of good news. A good God because He is slow to anger. Makikita natin that the Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. Indeed, He cares for those who trust in Him. For all who bend the knee to Him, the goodness of God is a comfort, for He is a great in power. Sabi ko nga kanina, no, that God is slow to anger because He have sent si Prophet Jonah. And therefore, yung action niya ngayon of judgment is justifiable. And the same way, actually, ang mangyayari sa atin in the second judgment of Jesus Christ, na kung saan pinadala niya ang kanyang anak na si Yesu Cristo to bring forgiveness and reconciliation unto us. And in the second coming niya, it's now judgment time. God is a good God because He is slow to His anger. He's refraining Himself despite the fact na we are guilty of being judged. Pero God is so patient and very good God. Second, an avenging God. To read accustomed to thinking first and foremost of God's grace and mercy. Yes, the opening lines of Nahum's first prophecy seem shocking para sa mga, especially the newly convert, when they
heard that the Lord is jealous, avenging his wrath against his enemies. But the reader, is quickly reminded in the following verse that God is a good God. God is merciful. God is kind. God is loving. God is merciful. God is a good God. No, avenging God siya. And he's a jealous God. It is the way of how he cares for the welfare of his people. No? Kaya nga yung relationship natin with God, it is personal. What does it mean to be personal? Meron siyang he is faithful unto us. Inapit tayo, he is standing before us. And ito yung pinaliwanag sa prophet is vengeance in the Lord, no, of all his bad people. So yung mga oppressors niya. The third theology, we have far from the Lord controls over nature and oversees the affairs of enemies and the comforter to his own people. He is indeed a powerful and active God, no? And he is very powerful. I mean, like directly, literally him defeat nations. He's using kingdoms to defeat kingdoms. Ganun po kapangyarihan ng Panginoon natin. And lastly, for the last theology is a God for Israel and Judah na babagsak itong Assyria. But for all who experience the endless cruelty of the Assyrians or the other tyrannical oppressors. Nahum's powerful message that tyranny and cruel injustice will not always endure. Nga, all who hear the news of Amos chapter 3 clap their hands. From his ancient vantage point, Nahum sees a day coming when messengers of cruel injustice will no longer be heard. Instead, he sees the feet of one who brings good news, who proclaims peace. For Nahum, this would be a messenger of the final end of Nineveh. But in the fullness of time, Nahum's words grew in significance and were linked with the good news of Christ's defeat of the most tyrannical oppressors of all time. Ito yung sin and death found in the book of Romans 8:1. So the things, no, unto his people. So not only for particularly yung people of Judah, but to all na nakaranas ng oppression before Assyria. And their downfall, yung downfall ng Assyria, is good news for them kasi they will no longer be thriving for this fire. So God is a good God, an avenging God, a powerful and active God, and our God is a God of good news. Now let's foreshadowing Jesus Christ and the book. Paul uses shades of the imagery of Nahum 1:15 in Romans 10:15 in regard to the ministry of the Messiah and the apostles. It may also be understood by any minister of the gospel of peace that God and has given to his people the peace that transcends all understanding. The preacher's work is also to bring glad tidings of good things, such as reconciliation, righteousness, pardon, life, and eternal salvation by a crucified Christ. The preaching of such a gospel and bringing such news make their feet beautiful. The imagery here is one who runs to others, eager and joyful to proclaim the good news. So, So Jesus lens in the book of Nahum that God has made peace with sinners by the blood of Christ. No, through the offering the blood of Christ, He made peace. He made reconciliation towards sa mga makasalanang tao. Yes. So our work also is to uh, run after those people with eagerness and joyful to proclaim this good news that God had made peace with sinners with the blood of Christ. Yung sa kanta na ano, joy to the world ba yun? Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Yung, made peace with sinners. And second, Jesus lens, no, the picture of God as the uh, divine warrior. Kasi many have seen no, that there is no absolutely there Nahum for the church today or for us today. Etong book of Nahum, wala daw relevance, sabi na. The prophecy is so specific and so bloody that it appears to have nothing to do with Jesus Christ. We have observed the movement of the book of Nahum from a general to a particular historical situation. The abiding significance of Nahum may be the most readily seen by returning to chapter 1 to verse 2 to 8, the great song of praise to God, the divine warrior, who both delivers his people and judges his enemies. The picture of God as a divine warrior in the Old Testament anticipates the coming of Jesus Christ, who is also frequently imaged as a warrior in the New Testament. Okay? Pero, ang kaibahan dito, no, however, the object of divine warfare naman is different. The object of divine warfare is different from what it was in the Old Testament. Kasi sa Old Testament, this time, kay Nahum, makikita natin that Yahweh was against or warred against the flesh and blood enemies of Israel, like Canaanites, Philistines, Syrians, Babylonians, and so forth. No? And even finally against disobedience of Israel itself. Pero dito sa kay Jesus Christ in Paul, Christ's death, resurrection, and ascension are seen as the culmination of his warfare against Satan and his cohorts. The Old Testament picture of God as warrior in Christ's warfare against Satan anticipates the coming of Jesus Christ in the book of Revelation. When evil comes to an end, as Jesus leads his army in the forefront of the Nahum army, is found in the warring army. Thus, although Nineveh no longer exists, the abiding significance of the book of Nahum is found in the warring cries of the New Testament, wearing Christ's armor. That is for the foreshadowing of Jesus in the book of Nahum. Okay, so these are for the references. Lag talaga siya mag-load. Tagal. Yan. Okay, we have Baker's Evangelical Dictionary, D.A. Carson, Dillard, Stewart, yung How to Read the Bible, Question, Old Testament Scriptures, survey by Mitchell, John Schultz, Wilmington, and Youngblood by Nelson, New Illustrated Bible Dictionary. So yan ang para sa references. Before ending, no, I just want to leave this yung sinabi ni Jamison, Fawcett, and Brown commentary. They conclude its comments on Nahom, in the book of Nahum, with the following remarks. Ito yung sinabi nila. Nineveh, once the admiration of the world, was doomed for ceasing unlamented. She perished without a comforter. Such is the final portion of all who live for self and not for the glory of God and the good of their fellow men. They who might have the Holy Spirit as their comforter, now and the Lord as their eternal portion, shall be stripped of all the meretricious adornments in wailing and gnashing of teeth without any to comfort them. For the book survey in the book of Nahum. Actually, ask question if you have, kasi medyo, can we, yes, can we stop recording?